something is wrong. And deep down, you already feel it. You pray, you fast, you believe, yet the struggle never seems to break. Why? What if the poverty many believers face is not just financial, but spiritual warfare operating behind a veil? What if someone who once worked in the dark kingdom has stepped forward, exposing the hidden strategies used against praying Christians? Tonight, secrets that were once whispered in occult circles are being revealed in the light, and once you see it, you will never pray the same way again. There is something many believers were never taught, something the dark kingdom understands, but the church often ignores. You can pray for hours and still remain spiritually ineffective, not because prayer has no power, but because prayer without authority becomes a sound, not a weapon. When I was still deep inside the occult world, there were meetings where strategies against believers were discussed. Yes, believers, not unbelievers. Because the kingdom of darkness is not afraid of people who simply believe. It studies those who pray, and it knows something shocking. Many Christians pray, but do not understand the authority they carry. So their prayers rise, but they never strike. You must understand this. In the occult, we were taught to monitor prayer patterns, especially from people who were desperate for financial breakthrough. We knew the signs: someone crying every night, someone begging heaven, someone constantly asking for help, but never commanding darkness to release what it stole. Those prayers rarely disrupted anything, because begging is not the language of spiritual authority. Authority commands, authority enforces, authority declares. But many believers were trained to only ask, and the dark kingdom takes advantage of that misunderstanding. You see, when a believer prays from a position of weakness, the atmosphere does not shift. It trembles only when someone knows who they are. This is why two people can pray the exact same prayer, but only one experiences breakthrough. The difference is revelation. Let me explain something that shocked me when I first left the occult world. We feared believers who prayed with identity, not emotion, not desperation, identity. Because when someone understands their spiritual authority, their prayers change tone. They stop begging, they start enforcing, and the spiritual realm responds differently. But many Christians remain financially stuck because their prayers are always defensive. They pray only when something goes wrong. They pray only when they feel pressure. They pray only when they are in crisis. That pattern makes them predictable, and the kingdom of darkness loves predictable believers because predictable prayer is easy to resist. But when someone begins to pray from authority, everything changes. I remember hearing a testimony that shook many people who were still inside occult practices. A man who had struggled financially for years suddenly began to prosper. At first, people assumed he had found a new job, but the truth was far deeper. His prayers had changed. Instead of saying, "God, please bless me," he began declaring, "I command every spirit blocking my provision to release what belongs to me." And something happened. Obstacles started collapsing. Opportunities appeared from unexpected places. Debts were cleared. Doors opened. Why? Because he stopped praying like a victim and started praying like someone who carried authority. This is the secret many Christians never hear. The enemy does not fear long prayers. It fears authoritative prayers. You can pray for 3 hours in desperation and nothing moves. But someone who understands spiritual authority can pray for 3 minutes and shake the atmosphere. the problem is not prayer. The problem is identity. When believers do not understand who they are spiritually, their prayers remain powerless. And when prayers remain powerless, financial oppression continues because there are forces that thrive on keeping believers spiritually confused. They want you to think poverty is normal. They want you to think struggle is your destiny. They want you to believe breakthrough is for someone else. But once a believer discovers their authority, the system begins to crack. You see, when someone prays with authority, three things happen. First, darkness is confronted. Second, spiritual resistance weakens. Third, divine provision is released. That is why the enemy fights so hard to keep believers praying from fear, because fear removes authority, but revelation restores it. And the moment you realize that your voice carries authority in the spiritual realm, your prayers stop sounding like requests. They begin sounding like enforcement. That is when financial oppression begins to lose its grip. But this is only the first layer of the hidden system, because there is another strategy the dark kingdom uses against believers. A strategy so subtle that millions of Christians never notice it. Yet it silently drains their financial breakthrough year after year. And when I reveal it, you will understand why some people work harder than ever, but still cannot escape financial struggle. The truth behind this second strategy is something I witnessed personally inside occult operations. And once you hear it, you will begin to see the pattern everywhere. There is a truth many believers struggle to accept. Not every financial struggle begins in the natural world. Sometimes the root is spiritual. And when I was still operating in the occult world, one of the most disturbing strategies discussed in dark gatherings was this: never attack a believer directly. Wait for the door to open. Because spiritual laws operate whether people understand them or not. And when a door is opened, access becomes possible. This is something many Christians never realize. They pray for breakthrough. They declare prosperity. They ask for divine provision. But at the same time, certain spiritual doors remain open in their lives, doors that quietly allow financial oppression to remain. You see, the dark kingdom does not always fight prayer. Sometimes it simply waits for contradiction. A believer may pray for blessing in the morning, but live in compromise throughout the day. A believer may ask God for increase, but hold bitterness, dishonesty, or destructive habits that silently sabotage their own breakthrough. This is the hidden tension many people never notice. Prayer invites blessing, but open doors invite resistance. And when those two forces collide, the result is delay. I remember hearing something during one of the gatherings that stunned me. Someone asked a question: how do we stop believers who pray constantly for financial increase? The response was chilling. Let them keep praying as long as the doors remain open. Those words stayed with me because the strategy was simple. If believers never examine their lives deeply, they may keep asking for breakthrough while unknowingly allowing the very things that block it. For example, dishonesty in small things. Many people see this as harmless: a little deception in business, a little manipulation in money matters, a little compromise when it feels convenient. But spiritually, dishonesty weakens authority. And once authority weakens, resistance increases. Another example is unforgiveness. This one is powerful. When someone holds deep resentment, bitterness, or hatred toward others, it does more than affect their emotions, it affects their spiritual atmosphere. Unforgiveness creates heaviness, and that heaviness can delay breakthroughs that prayer alone cannot release. Then there are destructive habits, habits that drain finances quietly, addictions, impulsive spending, living beyond means. These things may look purely practical, but the spiritual realm often amplifies them. What begins as a small weakness can become a cycle that keeps someone trapped financially. The enemy loves cycles because cycles make struggle feel normal. And once struggle feels normal, people stop expecting breakthrough. This is why many believers remain stuck. They pray sincerely, they love God deeply, but they never examine the hidden doors. And the dark kingdom knows this. It studies patterns, it observes behavior, it waits for consistency. If someone prays but continues repeating the same destructive patterns, the system of delay continues. But when a believer begins to close those doors, something shifts. The atmosphere changes. Authority begins to return. And when authority returns, spiritual resistance weakens. I remember hearing testimonies from people who experienced sudden financial breakthrough after making one simple decision. They removed compromise. One person decided to become completely honest in their business practices, even when it cost them money at first. Another person made the painful decision to forgive someone who had betrayed them financially. Another person confronted destructive spending habits and began living with discipline. At first, those changes felt difficult, but something surprising began to happen. Within months, new opportunities appeared. Unexpected promotions came, business connections formed, income increased, and many of them said the same thing. It felt like something invisible had been removed, because often something invisible had been removed. Spiritual doors that once allowed resistance had been closed. And once those doors closed, prayer began to flow without obstruction. This is why examining your life is not condemnation, it is alignment, it is spiritual clarity. Because when prayer and lifestyle move in the same direction, breakthrough accelerates. But there is another hidden reason many believers remain financially stuck. And this one shocked me the most when I first learned it, because it reveals a strategy used not just against individuals, but against entire communities of believers. A strategy designed to weaken financial momentum across generations. And once you understand it, you will begin to see why some families struggle with poverty patterns that seem impossible to break. There is a pattern many believers notice, but rarely understand. A father struggles financially his entire life. Then the son grows up, works harder, studies more, prays more, yet somehow the same struggle follows him. Years later, the pattern repeats again. Different generation, same financial battle. This is where many people begin to ask a painful question. Why does poverty seem to run in families? When I was still inside occult practices, one of the most disturbing realities we studied was this. Some financial battles are not random. They are patterns. Patterns that move through generations like invisible chains. Not because God designed it that way, but because spiritual strongholds can survive for decades when no one confronts them directly. You must understand something about the spiritual realm. Dark systems are patient. They do not always need immediate results. Sometimes the strategy is generational. If a stronghold cannot completely destroy a person, it will attempt something else. It will try to create a cycle of lack, a cycle of constant struggle, a cycle where every attempt at financial growth eventually collapses. From the outside, it looks like bad luck. But inside occult teachings, it was described differently. It was called maintaining the pattern. You see, the enemy does not always need to stop someone from working hard. It simply needs to ensure the results never match the effort. So a person works harder, sleeps less, pushes further, but the breakthrough never fully arrives. Something always happens. A business fails just when it begins to grow. A job opportunity disappears unexpectedly. Medical bills appear at the worst possible moment. Debt increases faster than income. And over time, the person begins to believe something dangerous. This is just how my life will always be. That belief is exactly what the enemy wants. Because once someone accepts the pattern, they stop fighting it. But the truth is this: patterns can be broken. I remember hearing about a woman who grew up in extreme financial hardship. Her parents struggled constantly. Debt followed the family everywhere. Arguments about money filled the house. When she became an adult, she noticed something disturbing. No matter how responsible she tried to be, financial problems kept appearing. Unexpected expenses, job instability, constant setbacks. At first, she blamed herself. She thought maybe she was simply unlucky. But one day, during prayer, she began asking deeper questions, not just about money, but about patterns. She began studying the history of her family, and what she discovered shocked her. The same financial struggles had existed for 3 generations, different circumstances, different cities, different jobs, but the same pattern of lack. Instead of accepting it, she made a decision. She would confront it spiritually. Her prayers changed. She no longer prayed only for provision. She began confronting the pattern itself. She began declaring that the cycle would stop with her. She fasted. She prayed with authority. She rejected the belief that poverty was her destiny. And something remarkable began to happen. Slowly, the cycle began to break. Opportunities appeared that had never existed before. Financial wisdom increased. Income stabilized. Years later, she looked back and realized something powerful. Her life had become the breaking point in the family pattern. This is what many believers never realize. Sometimes you are not just fighting for your own breakthrough. You are confronting a generational stronghold. And when someone finally stands with spiritual authority and refuses to accept the pattern, the chain begins to snap. But there is one more reason many believers remain financially stuck. And this one is perhaps the most dangerous of all, because it hides in plain sight. It does not look like spiritual warfare. It does not feel like opposition. In fact, it often disguises itself as something completely normal. But once you see it, you will understand why many people pray for financial blessing, yet unknowingly sabotage the very opportunities that could transform their lives. And when this final truth becomes clear, you will never look at financial breakthrough the same way again. There is a strategy the dark kingdom uses that is far more subtle than direct attack. It does not always block blessings. Sometimes it convinces people to ignore them. Many believers imagine financial breakthrough will arrive in dramatic ways: a sudden miracle, a large unexpected sum, a moment that instantly removes every struggle. But often, provision does not arrive like that. Provision frequently arrives as opportunity. An opportunity rarely looks spectacular in the beginning. It looks small, it looks ordinary, it looks like work. This is where many believers unknowingly sabotage their own breakthrough. They pray for increase, but when opportunity arrives disguised as responsibility, they hesitate. When I was still inside occult practices, there was something that was discussed openly. The goal was not always to stop blessings from appearing, the goal was to distort how believers perceive them. If opportunity can be made to look inconvenient, many people will reject it themselves. Imagine someone praying for financial freedom. Then a chance appears to learn a new skill, but it requires discipline, time, sacrifice. Instead of recognizing the opportunity, the person dismisses it. It's too difficult. It's not the right time. I'll do it later. Later never comes, and the opportunity quietly disappears. Another person prays for a better financial future. Then a business idea forms, but fear begins whispering. What if it fails? What if people laugh? What if you lose money? Fear convinces the person to stay comfortable, and comfort becomes the prison. You must understand something important. Breakthrough often requires movement, but fear encourages stillness, and when someone stays still long enough, opportunity moves on. I remember hearing about a man who struggled financially for many years. He prayed constantly for provision. One day, he met someone who offered to teach him a skill that could change his life. The training was not glamorous. It required months of learning, late nights, early mornings. Most people who started the training quit halfway. But this man felt something deep inside. He refused to ignore the opportunity, even when it was exhausting, even when progress felt slow. Years later, that skill became the foundation of a thriving business. And when people asked him about his success, he said something simple. I stopped waiting for miracles and started recognizing opportunities. That statement carries deep truth because many miracles arrive disguised as opportunities. But if someone expects breakthrough to look dramatic, they may overlook the quiet doors opening around them. Another common trap is comparison. Someone begins an opportunity that has potential for growth, but then they look at others who seem further ahead. Comparison whispers dangerous thoughts. You're too late. Others are already better. You will never catch up. Discouragement follows. And once discouragement takes root, many people abandon opportunities before they mature. But growth requires patience. Seeds do not become harvest overnight. Breakthrough often begins with small, consistent steps. This is why the enemy tries to magnify impatience, because impatience destroys consistency. And without consistency, opportunities never reach their full potential. There is also another hidden factor: mindset. If someone grows up surrounded by constant financial struggle, they may unconsciously develop limiting beliefs. Beliefs like money always disappears, success happens to other people, people like me never become financially stable. Those beliefs become invisible barriers. Even when opportunity appears, the mind rejects it because it contradicts the internal narrative. But when someone begins to challenge those beliefs, everything begins to shift. They start seeing possibilities where they once saw limitations. They start recognizing doors they previously ignored. They begin acting with confidence instead of hesitation. And when action replaces fear, momentum begins. This is the truth many people overlook. Financial breakthrough is rarely a single event. It is a series of aligned decisions, spiritual alignment, mental transformation, disciplined action, And when those three things come together, the results can be extraordinary. The dark kingdom cannot stop someone who prays with authority, closes spiritual doors, breaks generational patterns, and recognizes the opportunities placed in front of them. That combination is powerful because it removes the traps that keep many believers stuck. And when those traps are removed, the path toward financial breakthrough becomes clear. Now you understand what many people never see. The struggle was never just about money, it was about authority, alignment, and awareness. You are not destined to repeat cycles of lack. You have the power to confront every hidden resistance standing in your way. Stand up in your authority. Close every open door. Break every pattern that tried to follow your life and move forward with boldness, because when truth is revealed, chains begin to break.